Fiber optic sensors are great for those times when you have a tight space where regular photo optic sensors won't fit, because with a fiber optic sensor, you only need enough room for the fiber optic sensor head. The electronics can be placed away from the active area where you have more room to mount it. Or maybe you have a small opening that you need to be able to sense through, or maybe you just need to remote the electronics due to vibration or temperature. And one of the best places to use fiber optic sensors is in environments with lots of electrical noise, near variable frequency drives or power lines, for example, because you can put the fiber optic head near the noise and then remote the sensor electronics away from that noise, maybe even in a shielded cabinet. And since fiber optic cable isn't affected by electrical noise of any kind, you don't have to worry about false indications from the sensor. And you don't have to worry about electrical noise or EMI finding its way back to your control panel because there aren't any copper wires for it to travel on. Automation Direct offers a range of fiber optic sensors, from basic sensors where you just buy the configuration you want and plug it in, through fully configurable sensors where you can have up to 15 fiber optic sensors connected to one electronics unit. For the basic sensors, you just select whether you want NPN or PNP outputs, pigtail or connectorized wiring, and if you want to teach the detection range or use a potentiometer to set it. Then you select which optic cable you want to use. Do you want to use a separate transmitter and receiver optic so you can set it up as a through beam detector? Or do you want a single head that does both so you can set it up as a diffuse or reflex sensor? For the diffuse optics, you can see they have two fibers going to the sensor head. One sends the light out, the other receives the light and sends it back to the sensor electronics. These fibers are literally just light pipes. If I hold the sensor head up to a green LED, you can see the other end of the cable light up. If I hold one of the other ends up to the green LED, you can see that side of the sensor head light up. And if I hold the other cable up to the LED, you can see the other side of the sensor head light up. There's a standard head like this, and one like this where you can insert it into areas where you might otherwise not be able to reach. The through beam cables for these basic sensors are available in several different ranges. The only difference is the fibers have different thicknesses. The larger the diameter of the fiber, the more light it can transmit and receive, the greater the detection range will be. If I light up two different cables with an LED, you can actually see the difference in the diameter of the cables. Okay, so that was the basic fiber optic sensor. You just select the sensor with the features you want, select the sensor head that you need, cut the fiber cable to the length you need with the provided cutting tool, insert the fibers into the unit. There's little arrows on the sensor to tell you which hole is transmit and which is receive, and then clamp them down, and you're done. Easy. There's a separate video that shows you how to set up this kind of sensor using the front panel buttons, or the potentiometer if you prefer to use that sensor. Now, if you need more flexibility than that, or you think your needs might change over time, or you aren't sure exactly how the sensor will be ultimately deployed, then take a look at the OPT series fiber optic sensors from Wengler. With these, instead of buying a different dedicated sensor for every application, you just buy one and configure it to do whatever you want. And since you configure it, you have a lot more options and features you can customize to optimize your application. That gives you a lot more flexibility, allows you to experiment with different configurations to get the best possible performance, and it doesn't tie your hands like the single-purpose basic sensors do. And the best part is, the basic version of these configurable OPT fiber optic sensors actually costs less than any of the DF series sensors. Here's a side-by-side comparison showing the difference. They all have an output to indicate the presence or absence of an object, but this one can handle up to 15 fiber optic cables at the same time. The base unit can handle 3 fiber optic cables, and then you can add up to 12 more fiber optic cables by attaching add-on modules. And yes, you can swap them in and out while the base is running. We'll cover this in more detail in the quick start video for this sensor, but I do need to point out that only 13 of the 15 possible inputs have physical outputs via these M12 disconnects. The last 2 inputs can only be accessed via software using the I/O link feature we'll discuss below. They all have some kind of indicator so you can see when the object is detected. They all do through beam and diffuse type detection, which really just depends on which cable you plug in. The cable with the separate transmitter receiver heads, or the cable with the single head that does both. Here are the detection ranges you can expect with these guys. Remember that with the basic sensor, the range is changed by changing the diameter of the fiber in the cable. With the OPT fiber optic sensors, you can do that too, but you can also adjust the sensitivity with a parameter. The OPT fiber optic sensor outputs can be configured for normally open, normally closed, NPN, PNP, push-pull, and can even be configured as a pulse out instead of a level. The 2040 has NPN and PNP outputs. The 2041 has PNP and push-pull outputs. The 2043 does all three. These two have OLED displays, which makes setting up and testing the sensors so easy. I love that I can actually see the signal strength graphically on these sensors. The basic models only have a basic teach mode, and two of them let you adjust the detection distance with a manual potentiometer. With the OPT fiber optic sensors, you can do a normal teach, which sets the detection threshold at the center of the object. The minimal teach mode sets the detection threshold at about 17% past the object distance. Maybe you have other objects coming down the line that you don't want to detect, and they're larger than the midpoint of the box, for example. The 2-point teach gives you a little more control over the detection threshold. You detect both objects, and the sensor automatically sets the threshold between them. Dynamic teach is very similar to that, except you put the sensor into record mode, run the objects by it, and it automatically determines the min and the max distances and sets the detection threshold between the two. So it's just a dynamic version of the 2-point teach. With background teach, you just teach the sensor where the background is, and it automatically sets the detection threshold just above the background. So now it will detect pretty much any object that passes by. Window mode sets up a window around the object so the sensor won't detect objects above or below a certain range. And with these OPT fiber optic sensors, you can adjust the window width and the hysteresis around that. And on some of these, you can even do an external teach, where an external trigger triggers the teach function. The OPT fiber optic sensors have a lot more cable options. We'll do a separate video on all of those and how to choose the right one for your application, because it's kind of hard to wrap your head around all the different options. The OPT fiber optic sensors let you adjust the on-off delay and the measurement speed, and some have adjustable filtering to help smooth out the signal in noisy environments. And these two sensors support I/O Link. So if you happen to have an I/O Link master, then it can read and configure the sensor automatically for you. Now, at the time of this video, Automation Direct doesn't sell or support I/O Link masters, so please don't call asking about that. They won't be able to help you. Check out these quick start videos to learn how to set up and configure the OPT fiber optic sensors. And if you need any help, please contact Automation Direct's free, award-winning tech support during regular business hours. They'll be happy to help. And don't forget the forums. There are lots of folks there that love to share their years of experience. Just don't post any questions for Automation Direct support staff there. They don't monitor the forums on a regular basis.